This presentation coaches students regarding looking up their grade and checking their papers for plagiarism. If the paper has already been submitted, but it's not past the due date yet, and you're just wanting to check your originality report, the student can go into course content, into the folder where the paper exists, and scroll down to the Turnitin assignment. You can click on View Assignment, then My Submissions. The originality report will appear here. There's 15% on that. You can click and open up that report in another window. Now, what you'll notice is that I've already graded the student's paper, and so you've got some comments over here. What if it is past the due date and you're not just checking the paper for plagiarism, but you're actually looking at your grade and wanting to know the comments? Well, you can come in the same way through course content and click on the assignment and then click into this graded area, either on the GradeMark comments or the similarity index. It doesn't matter. Or you can go into My Grades. You can locate the assignment and just click on that paper, and you'll notice the same options here. I've already clicked on the comments box, so I'm going to go right in here. You can see this is when you click on the originality report. If you're checking for plagiarism, make sure that the originality area is red. You can scroll through the paper and see where Turnitin has marked up the paper. This example is one where a student has added in a quote to the paper. Now let's see if we have all the elements that we need for checking for plagiarism to make sure that this is not a plagiarized resource. First, anything that is highlighted this much, that means that that is word for word from the original source. And I just clicked on that highlighted material to have the comparison here. I can click on full source text and scroll up and down through any of the segments that are from that resource. I also have the option to skip down to different resources throughout the paper. So if I click on number 4, then that's going to scroll me down to the Works Cited page, and I can look at resource 4 here. I'm going to go back up to the potentially plagiarized resource. So this much information being word for word from a resource means that this had better be a direct quote. If intended to be a paraphrase, that is not going to work. We have way too many words here that are used that are matching another resource that has quoted Douglas. We need to make sure that we have quotation marks around it. So word for word information would be a direct quote and must have a quotation mark, and I can see one right here at the beginning and one right at the end of the statement itself. What's another component to make sure that a direct quote or a paraphrase is not plagiarized? Well, it has to have a citation. Here is the citation. I don't see an author there, so I'm going to go up and look in the sentence and, oh, I bet Douglas, Frederick Douglass, is the author of this particular work. So what I'm going to go do is compare that to the Works Cited entries. Do I find an entry for Douglas, specifically one for learning to read? And here we are in the D's in the Works Cited list. We have 2 entries for Douglas. That's why this author has added in a title to the citation. So sure enough, we have Douglas, learning to read. I don't see any other citations in there that begin with learning to read. So I know that that's the resource. I have located my citation both in the paper and in the Works Cited page. So that means that this writer has responsibly recorded the information from this resource, and this would not be an example of plagiarism. However, if the citation were not there, were not present, or if the citation was not clear, then that would mean that we have plagiarized, or if the quotation marks were missing, that would mean that that work or that portion of the paper is plagiarized. I'm hoping you're going to do it as a student is get in here, look at these reports, make the changes, and re-upload your paper. Once you've made a number of changes in it, I want you to re-upload and I want you to recheck it one more time to see what comes up. You will find that some of the information in the paper might appear to come from a similar source, and I have included small matches in the work that we're doing here with plagiarism evaluation. And what I would want to do is look up this resource. So again, if I click on the 18, I'm going to get the material from that source right here. And they're talking about women's rights and women's suffrage. I don't see Douglas in here. I might want to click on full source view, which will pop it up over here, just to make sure that I haven't inadvertently copied some information. I want to read above and below that particular segment too. because what I have found is that students might not plagiarize the quote, but they might accidentally put in too much information around the material that's popping up as being plagiarized too. If everything checks out okay, just ignore this. But if you're really feeling as if some of the information is very similar to the resource, then make sure you go back in and paraphrase it. This particular resource, I'm going to exclude it. I'm not even going to worry about those little blobs because it has nothing to do with Douglas. It has nothing to do with women's suffrage, which is what the resource was coming up with. So we're going to just ignore that and move on to the next portion. Here's a bit that we have some citations, but I don't see any quotation marks in there. But Turnitin is also not marking this as being plagiarized, right? There are no words between Abby Kelly and Sterling 14 that appear word for word from another resource, right? What does that mean? It means that this student has paraphrased this part from that resource very well. And so if this paraphrase is coming up as being clean, then I would move on to the next one and I would evaluate it. And I would pay attention to this. I would put that period outside of the parenthesis and make sure that I finished off my paragraph with my words. But in regard to paraphrasing, this section is pretty decently paraphrased. We're going to move on. Here we have another direct quote. Do we have quotation marks around it? Do we have a proper citation? Yes, we do. We're not going to worry about it, and we're going to move on. All right, so these are the things that I want you to do as you are going through your paper. I'm scrolling down to look at the works cited page. This resource right here has a lot of plagiarism with it. You know what? I hope it does. The works cited page is the one exception to the plagiarism rule in here. That if you are getting a lot of plagiarism or a lot of highlighting in your works cited page, that means that other people have also cited this resource, hopefully pretty responsibly. It also shows that you're getting it right. There's another database called Academic Search Premier by EBSCOhost, and this is just the Elite version. So that's the only reason why Elite is not highlighted. And then, of course, there was a different date of access for that article. That's why those parts aren't showing up. But what this means is that you're probably citing it pretty decently. Then we've got some issues. But for the most part, if your works cited page is relatively plagiarized, you're probably doing a good job with your citations. Here's one that breaks off a little earlier in the citation. Either this entry was cited in an APA article, or this student might be missing something. So I'm noticing that the number or the issue is not there, and that student would want to add that information into the citation. Well, now that you know how to read for plagiarism, I'm going to take you into the GradeMark area. So just click on the GradeMark button, and you will notice over to the right, some general comments appear. Now, in these general comments, you'll notice sometimes, not always, but sometimes, there will be a voice comment for you to click on. Sarah, I want to tell you that you have done a fantastic job on this paper. Sometimes you will have a voice comment, sometimes you will not. I try to give some good overall advice there. Usually you will have a text comment, or you will have a rubric to be able to click to and review. This particular one does not have a rubric. I've given my comments in the general comments area, so that'll be what this student is able to listen to and also to review. You want to scroll through the paper, and you'll notice that there are these highlights that are linked into comments. If you cursor over the comment, then you get to read the entire comment. Those will appear throughout the paper. You should absolutely look through here and see what comments I have added into the paper so that you can not just see why I evaluated this paper this way, but also what you can do on future papers. So when you're finished with the Turnitin view, you can just click out of that window and you're back into Blackboard and can move on to the next assignment.